So you're at the. I have this. It's pretty nice, eh? I have this this group in Jerusalem on Sundays, and we do some chanting. It's a bit different. We chant some Zen Buddhist verses and chants. And some people like it, some people don't. Some people get up and walk out when we start. And so I thought, okay, let's give it a break. So for a few weeks, I decided we're going to skip the chanting, see what happens. Nothing happened. So then we started chanting again. It's the end of the story. Oh, she's like, we chanted, we didn't chant. And it was nice both ways. And I brought one of the chants tonight, actually, because I want to talk about one of them. It's the Heart Sutra, which is a central chant, a central verse in Zen and Mahayana Buddhism. I wanted to talk about it tonight a little bit, read it with you. It's a real common chant. It's chanted pretty much in every Zen center, monastery, even home around the world. It's probably one of the most well-known verses. For that, though, I was sitting outside before we started tonight on a bench in the park across the street, talking with a couple of guys here. And talking about different things. And one of the points that came up was how uncommon it is to find yourself sitting on a bench talking with a friend about your sort of journey, like your inner and outer journey. So that when you ask someone how you doing, you actually mean like, how's your practice? Not how's work and your family. I mean, that's part of your practice, true. But we don't have many opportunities to talk about with somebody in a kind of quiet and restful way. And so your spiritual friends are important to, share that with. Maybe you can share it with your people at home. But usually we find ourselves pretty busy. And it's funny because we see being busy as a kind of value. Like, how are you these days? Oh, I'm really busy. And we're kind of like, good for you, Or, wow, you must be successful. Or it's like a sign of success to be really busy. Even if it's stressful. And if you go on a retreat, it seems busy, but there's a lot, you're like busy with a lot of space, open time. You go to a monastery. Moments where you're doing things, but there's a lot of time. And you don't really feel like you're wasting your time. But when you're in an environment where everybody's busy, then if you're not busy, you feel like you're wasting your time. So there's this poem I read yesterday by Issa, the Japanese haiku poet. And he wrote, "Moon and the flowers. 49 years walking around wasting time. That was his poem. He has one also when he turned 50. I'll say that next year. I said it yesterday because I turned 49 yesterday. So that was, it's too late. Tell me next year. Moon and the flowers, 49 years, walking around wasting time. But if you have the moon and the flowers, is it a waste of time? What do we really need? What are we trying to get out of our busyness? If you can't actually appreciate the moon and the flowers, if you don't see the full moon mind and the blooming and the blossoming in your moment, if you don't have that, then, you know, if you're comparing yourselves to the busyness, it really is you're wasting your time. You feel that? Not being productive. Just remember moon and flowers. That's it. It'll bring you back. And walk around. Just like sitting next to Ajahn makes me talk more slowly. Thanks.
His English is not so good, that's why.
Thanks. It's great. My Thai's not so good. I'm not going to go into Hebrew. So, let me pass this around for us to enjoy. Wait. A second. Just while it's going around, the role of sutras and verses in Mahayana and Zen is kind of different. Well, yeah, very different than in Theravada. You kind of have a fixed canon is written and closed and verified in Theravada. You know what the Buddha said. You can study it. You can learn from it. But how do you have these sutras about the Buddha's teachings and sometimes what the Buddha said when they were written after the Buddha died? Doesn't really, I mean, how does it work? With his spirit, his ghost, his incarnation, they find, I mean, in Tibet, in Vajrayana, it actually gets quite mystical and magical. Like they find sutras behind rocks and caves and stuff. How did that appear? Yeah, it is magical. Then it suddenly becomes part of the Vajrayana tradition. So this started to be written about, 300 or 400 years after the Buddha died. It continued until it became like 100,000 verses. So the actual Heart Sutra, there's different versions of it. There's like the 100,000 verse one, which is many volumes. There's like the 20,000 verse, there's 800 verses, and then there's this. Like it became sort of condensed. So this is called the Heart, the Mahaprajna Paramita. Okay, the great heart wisdom, verse. And the point was to have something that they could remember, carry with them, walk around, recite, which was a sort of a condensation or crystallization or really, concentrated version of the teachings of the vast 100,000 verses of teachings that are so expansive and trying to explain everything that's going on. And what if you were to take all that and sort of boil it down into, one page? What would that page be? Well, in Mahayana, this is that page. This is what the page is. So, so that's why it took on this sort of really central, place in Mahayana. That's why they chant. There's lots of things they chant and stuff, but everybody chants this because it's, the condensed teaching. Now, of course, it's a very odd and strange condensation. You read it and it's like, Is it trying to trick you in some way? Is it being, intentionally obscure and unclear to show you that the teachings cannot be accessed so easily? You have to practice your whole life to try to open this up. I don't think so. I think the verses themselves are a good reminder that your intellectual understanding of the teachings, you can get that by reading books, but that's not a replacement for the really deep awakening that will happen in your life through your practice. So you chant this, you can understand some of it, you can not understand some of it, sometimes you connect to it, sometimes you don't. All of that is secondary. You can't chant it just to chant it. And you relate to it in different ways at different times of your life. Like with all things. But this especially, because it is kind of, if you would take everything and kind of make it really concentrated, how would you expect to understand it? There's a real ego there that's saying, if I don't get it, then, I'm not going to do it. What do we want to get? That's like one thing we can ask when we encounter something like the Heart Sutra or chants or teachings. What is our intention when we engage with it? Are we trying to, kind of own it? Do we want to possess it? Do we want to get it? So, are we trying to relate this to my life? Or am I trying to relate my life to the Heart Sutra? So there's a different perspective there. So much of reading and what we do is, how do I relate this book to my life? How does it relate to my life? That's nice. But it's also like, okay, well, get over your life a little. How do you relate your life to the teachings? Not how do you relate the teachings to your life. It's like, the condensed version is not your life. Your life is not the condensed version of the teachings. How do you relate your life to this? Not relate this to your life. See? Dogen said something like that. And he said, delusion is finding yourself, is seeing everything through you, and awakening is seeing you through everything. That's like a really interesting perspective. So you walk around the world, and it's not about how the world relates to you. It's about how do you relate to the world. So the world is on its terms, and you have to relate to the world on its terms. Not, how are you going to relate to me? So I want to take a look at this, and one of the things that we'll notice with this is that the first word is already something that gives us pause. Avalokiteshvara. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, doing deep prajna paramita. So, already have to wonder, what's happening here? We have a teaching and it begins with sort of a stage. There's a stage. There's this sort of myth that happened where there was like this big assembly, and they think maybe the Buddha was there, maybe the Buddha wasn't there. Maybe the Buddha was there in spirit, maybe the Buddha was meditating, maybe the Buddha was Avalokiteshvara. There's all kind of different versions. You know, where's the Buddha here? You know, if this is like the condensed version, shouldn't the Buddha be saying it? Why is it the Bodhisattva of compassion? And that's what Avalokiteshvara is. Avalokiteshvara is, or named Canon, also, or Quan Un, in different traditions, is the manifestation of compassion, the enlightened manifestation of compassion. And this already informs us. This already explains a lot. Who's giving the condensed teachings of the Buddhist canon? The expression of compassion. The whole reason the teachings were given was as a compassionate gesture. We have to always have that in mind. Why are we doing this practice? Is to end suffering. Why do we want to end suffering? Because we have compassion for ourselves and others who suffer. And compassion is the wish that the suffering will end. Why? Because it hurts. You know, it hurts. You don't have to philosophize about it. Pain should end. You know, if we just say, oh no, it's empty, it's not real, why should it end? It's just your aversion to the pain. Come on. Right? Compassion. Pain, you know, suffering and the end of suffering, that's the main teaching here. Okay? So, it goes into emptiness, it goes into non-self, it goes into all of that. You know, we're going to read that. No eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. The emptiness of all things, the seemingly negation of all parts of body and mind, of even suffering. But who's teaching this? Compassion. Compassion's teaching this. So, when you start getting lost in some of these details, you have to go back to the start. Who's giving this talk? Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. And if you just remember that, whenever you start feeling frustrated, then it sort of clears the sky a little bit. Right? Yeah, I can be confused, I can not know what's going on. But this all starts out of compassion. And that's the faith that we have to have in the teachings, is that it's not just in order to be, I mean, what's the point of wisdom if it's not, you know, for the sake of ending suffering? You can be smart, but if it's not to help all beings, what's the point? You know, what's the point of your success, of your busyness, if it's not helping in some way? You know, what's the point of success if you die alone? Right? Like, what is the point of that? I mean, you're going to die alone. But what's the point of it if you haven't helped others along the way? So, a bodhisattva is a sattva is a great being, an enlightened, an awakened being. An awakened being in Mahayana is the person who has reached sort of enlightenment, achieved awakening, but continues to be reborn because the work's not done. Other people are still suffering. And they take a really strong vow that I will continue to return until all beings have, you know, have been relieved of suffering. So it's quite an immense vow. And Avalokiteshvara is the person who is manifesting that. in some of the statues and imagery of Avalokiteshvara, it's like this being with 1,000 arms, okay, or sometimes with many eyes or ears to reach out and help all different beings. And it's also interesting that there are a lot of different arms, because it's not just helping a lot of different beings, but helping them each differently. Different arm for each person. You know, what you need is different from what you need. So Avalokiteshvara is aware of that. Just the way the Buddha would give teachings in different ways to different people, but saying the same Dharma, because he understood skillfully what each person needed. So Avalokiteshvara is the Mahayana manifestation of that. You know, different hand for each person. The other thing we have here is doing deep prajna paramita, not learning, not studying, but doing the wisdom is something that you have to manifest. You have to, it's not just time out. Right? It's not time out. This is a deep practice that the Bodhisattva of compassion was doing. And then from that place, okay, clearly saw the emptiness of all the 5 conditions. So there's, in this sentence, we have part of the essential teachings, which is the emptiness of all the 5 conditions, which is one of the first teachings that the Buddha gave of the 5 skandhas, the 5 aggregates, the 5 parts of existence, the way a human being is made up. That there's form, like I have a body, and then there's feeling, that I get sensation. Okay, so body, so my body touches the ground, I have touch, and then there's perception. We're seeing how self happens. That's what the 5 conditions are, is how we get to this of being conscious and being aware of self. So there's forms like the body and the cup, the teacup, and there's sensation where I can touch it and feel it, and there's perception that I'm kind of aware of the hardness and of the cupness of it, and then there is the form and the sensation and perception, and then there's this sort of will, right? Volition is a will. That's where karma happens. It's like, ooh, it's a nice cup. Like it was a cup, I realized it was hard, and then I start to create a relationship to the cup. That's the 4th level. And my cup is empty, meaning I want more tea. Or my cup is full, nice. Or I like it or I don't like it, right? So on that 4th level, then I start to get involved in terms of a like and dislike, all the thoughts I have about it. And then I have a sort of a self-consciousness. The last aggregate or condition is, there's a consciousness, a general consciousness arising out of that. So we see it all flows together into what? My sense of self. And I don't separate them in my awareness, moment-to-moment awareness, but it happens all kind of simultaneously, like body, sensory feeling, and then perception, where I start to be aware of it, and then you see I have a body, and then it receives, and then I start to perceive, meaning I'm starting to be aware of it, and then I start to think about it, and then it's like, yeah, me, okay? There's like a whole self-consciousness that comes out of that. Happens seamlessly, happens so fast, happens immediately. But since there is a cause and effect relationship to it, and it's dependent on interacting with the world, and there's no self in a vacuum, then that interdependency of self and other factors means that there's no essential self there. We saw how it is created by this relationship to all things and to the world and to the 5 aggregates. It suddenly has a self arising. And they all depend upon each other. There's no perception if there's not feeling. There's no feeling if there's no body. Right? And there's no sense of consciousness if all those things don't happen. So just looking at the 5 conditions, the 5 skandhas, closely, the Buddha taught clearly that they're empty of having some sort of permanent selfhood, right, or permanent essence to them. Each of them are changing according to changing conditions, right? When you suddenly change the condition, I mean, if I'm with my body, I mean, first of all, my body's getting older, so my form is going to change, and also the form of sitting on this nice cushion, if I go sit on the concrete outside, my sensations will change, and my perception will change, and then my thoughts will change, and then my sense of who I am, where I am, what I am, will change. So, if none of those are fixed, then they're empty. What does empty mean? Again, this is what we have to understand in this teaching clearly. So when it says empty, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Right? It just means it doesn't exist independently, separately, permanently. But it's in flow, flux, change relationship. Right? We cut it off, and we tend to like identify with the selfhood, the consciousness that is in connection to all, that's arising in connection to all these conditions. And I say, that's me. Right? And I start to make that independent of all the changing conditions. How did that happen? Well, that's delusion. Okay? That's delusion. That's called ignorance. Meaning I'm not really aware of the process happening over and over again, and how I'm reselfing myself again and again. And if I were to really look closely at it, and how do I do that? The deep prajnaparamita. Doing deep prajnaparamita. Right? You got to do the practice deeply, and you'll start to see the emptiness of self. Doesn't mean you don't exist. It just means you don't exist as a separate, permanent, fixed essence. Right? That's why we got to take this practice and do it. And why are we doing it? Because it starts to make us more free. It's a compassionate teaching. Remember, we're not doing this as a sort of mind game. Oh yeah, I'm empty. What are you talking about? This is the point, is to end suffering. Right? You got to see how that connects to doing deep prajnaparamita, so that we can let go of some of our attachments to ourself. And we can start letting go to attachment to self when we start to see that self is not always what I thought it is. Meaning, it's a little empty. Empty of what? My fixed ideas. My fixed ideas. Clearly saw emptiness of all 5 conditions. We get glimpses of that, right? Everybody has glimpses of freedom. When you can see the change, when you accept the change, when you allow this process to happen, and you don't get so hung up on who you think you are. We get these glimpses, right? But here we want to see it clearly. The main difference between like your glimpse and the bodhisattva of compassion, right, is that seeing clearly doesn't disappear in the next moment. That's how she views the world, you know, and herself, ongoing. Right? Try to have that perspective more than just this fleeting instant. That's what the deep practice is for. Thus, completely relieving misfortune and pain. Here we have it straight out. Like that's, you know, that's a clear statement. Realizing the emptiness of the 5 conditions will completely relieve suffering. So then we can understand that the source of suffering is when we're really attached to this form. We're really attached and we see it as permanent. When we get hung up on our ideas of ourselves. So we could end here. We're not going to continue a little more. We already see what, you know, the whole point. It relieves misfortune and pain. O Shariputra. Now, kind of opens her eyes, starts to talk. Right? Up until now, we just saw what the Bodhisattva compassion was doing, and we saw that she was completely, you know, free. She had achieved liberation. O Shariputra, And Shariputra was also a very wise student, and who's now being taught by the Bodhisattva of compassion. Form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. Okay, this is the sort of iconic statement that people like and get confused by. But we see that you can't just say form is no other than emptiness. Because if we say that, then what do we do with those 5 skandhas? Are we saying that they don't exist? No. Emptiness is no other than form. How are you going to understand emptiness if it's not through form? Right? And if you don't see emptiness in form, then you're going to start thinking that this is really, unchanging and permanent. So the emptiness gives us a healthier relationship to form. But if we start letting go a little too much, meaning we start denying that it's real, then she reminds us, and emptiness is no other than form. Right? You need that balance in your life. We call it the balance. The 2 wings of enlightenment in the teachings are called wisdom and compassion. Wisdom is understanding the emptiness. And compassion is honoring the form. So one without the other is totally unbalanced. If you just walk around on a trip of emptiness, it gets all empty. I don't even know what that means. But if we were to get hung up on emptiness, then we'd stop relating to the real pain. And so, compassionately, she reminds us, and remember, when you start understanding emptiness, it brings you back to form. And emptiness is no other than form. Form is exactly emptiness, emptiness exactly form. Sensation, conception, discrimination, awareness are likewise like these. Just repeated the 5 conditions. Okay, there's form, sensation, conception, discrimination, and awareness. Discrimination, discriminating consciousness. I like and dislike. Okay, like and dislike. Okay. And I like and dislike my conceptions, meaning my thoughts. And those thoughts came up from the sensations I had. Which really means, when you really like something and you get a really great sense of self and you think you need this to be you, how did that happen? Where did it come from? It was conditioned. And if everything is conditioned, then nothing is, essential. That's what the form is emptiness reminds us. Or likewise like this. O Shariputra, all dharmas are forms of emptiness. Not born, not destroyed, not stained, not pure. Without loss, without gain. All dharmas. The dharmas mean different things. Dharmas can mean teachings. Dharmas can mean like all the particles of existence. Okay? Dharma can just mean the law. So, however you want to understand this, but let's think of it just in terms of, existence. All dharmas, meaning this world, this enlightened world, are forms of emptiness. Not born, not destroyed, not stained, not pure, without loss, without gain. All the ideas that we have about things being created, things being destroyed, about things being good and things being bad, about things being pure and things being stained. All of those labels are ours. They come from mind. They come from mind. All of them come from the ideas we have about reality. And so all of this no, not born, not destroyed, not stained, not pure. Whatever you can say about reality, you're really saying about yourself. You're never really describing reality accurately. And if we can understand that and accept it, then we can be more flexible and perhaps listen more and project less. So this is a way of checking, all of these ideas that we get such a solid, firm, and correct sense of life and the world. Is it necessarily so? And Suzuki Roshi said, yeah, it may be, but not necessarily so. So that sense of not saying it doesn't exist, but maybe it doesn't exist exactly the way I think it does. I mean, myself, you, others.
But is there something good and bad?
Is there good and bad?
No, always to speak in English is tricky
Pain
for me.
Pain and pleasure?
No, good and bad, like wholesome and unwholesome. Because, not from my point of view, I say more categorically, there is good and there is bad. Not from לא ממקום סובייקטיבי, אלא פשוט.
Well, objective? I mean, how do we get into an objective point of view? Like from what mind? From Buddha mind? Maybe from Buddha mind.
Like from operating in the world, it's not because I think something is good and if someone else will tell me, well, I think to help someone is a good thing.
Yeah.
And if someone else will tell me, well, it's a bad thing. So I don't think it's equal. I just will not accept his point of view. I think he have a wrong view. Objectively or categorically. I will not accept multi-perspective here.
Yeah, it's not relativistic. I mean,
exactly.
We're not going into postmodern relativism that everything is just fiction. Right? That's not what the Heart Sutra is doing here. It's pre-postmodern. If I can put it that way.
Yeah, but we are in our society.
It's pre-modern. It's pre-modern. It's way pre-modern. But so as a pre-modern point of view, what are we saying? Is it relativistic though? There's actually in the later teachings, Nagarjuna was talking about these two truths, the relative and the absolute. And on the relative truth of dealing in the world, there is good and bad. And good is what is wholesome and relieves harm, relieves pain. And bad is what causes pain, deliberately. Right? So we can clearly see, and you should stop someone from hitting and abusing and killing someone else. Right? Because that is relatively and objectively, on the relative point of view, bad. Is that the only way to see it, though? Is that the only way to see it? And when we talk about relative point of view and relative truth, and there are changing conditions of relative truth, because then I have to be flexible. Like what happens if you have a bunch of termites that are going to be eating the wood of your temple? What do? Well, if my relative view that killing is bad, then we're going to lose the temple, right? And I've heard, at least I was in a Tibetan center where they talked to the lamas and they said we have to call the exterminators. Okay? That's what they had to do. Right? Now, how did they make that decision? Well, they were having to judge it relatively. But if I see one bug walking, and it's from the same family, I'm not going to run at it and step on it, because in that relative situation, it would be bad for me to step on it and kill it for no cause at that point. So we can see that our relative morality is not so absolute and fixed, right? And if we think that I know and I can judge well, then I feel a text like this can help me be a little less sure, right? And I think that's one of the things it's doing. It's not saying you're going to jump into emptiness and suddenly everything is, what? Shanti, right? No. It's more a sense of look and look again. I think that's part of what I receive from the Heart Sutra is the invitation or the nudge to question, to doubt, right? To wonder and ask, what is really, what is really the right thing to do here? And are my ideas like really solid, right? Or should I pause and say, maybe, but not necessarily so. So that kind of attitude of openness, of questioning, of wonder. First of all, I'm not really sure what this all means. That in itself is a teaching. Just the way the Heart Sutra is expressed is one of saying, what's going on? Which I think is the attitude towards the world and our own moral decisions. That instead of walking through like a bulldozer saying, I know the path, right? And if something gets in my way, I'm going to bulldozer. It is more, I think, that sense of, I'm going to pause and wonder for a bit. I'm going to sit on this. Going to go back to deep prajna paramita. Right? Maybe I need some more practice. I need to do this a little more. So, on the one hand, on the relative truth, and then the other truth is the absolute truth. So these two truths that are really one truth, they're like, seamless. But we can talk about them separately. So the absolute truth, this goes from compassion, which is working on the relative level, to the absolute level of saying, all of our ideas, all of them are a no-no, right? They're all missing something. They're all missing something. They're all partial. I think that's the point. They're all partial. So when we're in the realm and the area of thought, decisions, evaluating things, anything you come up with, which may work in this moment, is going to be partial and limited and not absolute. So shifting means we have to step back and simply suspend judgment, right? And that's a place of great openness, that sense of, that patience, that waiting, that sense of not really knowing. Right? And then we go back to knowing. You can know, but you have to balance it with the not knowing. So the knowing is the form, and the not knowing is the emptiness. And so I think we have to see these as poles of the one world, right? Which is better, the North Pole or the South Pole? Well, how do you compare them? It's the same planet. So I see form and emptiness similarly, right? The poles of the kind of Dharma world. Which one? Well, they're both holding the world together. So that's kind of how I sort of see it. We separate them in terms of talking. We separate also, compassion and wisdom. We separate absolute and relative. We separate form and emptiness because we can do this with our ideas. But, as we live, they are one. That didn't really answer anything.
I also feel that we gave the example of if you see someone who says, I think helping someone is bad, I also think that, at least when I read this text, is that it refers to that notion that you have, which is a form of emptiness. Not the subject, not the specific subject that comes to mind, which is in this case, helping somebody is bad. But it's the notion you have about this someone else, the notion you have about yourself, which is already separating you and him. And it's also, to me, it also refers to even having that notion. It's a form which is in the end a form of emptiness. Doing this him, me, helping, not helping, all that is not the real life.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's this one Zen teacher, EQ. His haiku was, you know, every time I open my mouth, another mistake. And
So it's wrong.
and so I I wish it were funny. It weren't so true.
I just said before something, listening to you, to this relative values, that the absolute value is that life is, you should not kill someone else, that life is somehow a holy thing, and then in relative situations you may come into a situation where you have to decide whether as a farmer or as against a hermit or against in war situation.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
the absolute value is, as I believe, I see, is the life. This is absolute. This is not relative.
Mm.
But maybe I'm. I don't know. Maybe I did a mistake too.
You just don't want to say anything. I tend to think that, like, from the absolute and the emptiness and everything, there's actually, like, nothing I can say, nothing we can say about it. So I kind of have a feeling that even to say life is ultimate value is a relative statement. Even that is a relative statement, which is important and holy. And holy is relative. And anything we say is going to be on the side of relative, because it depends on so many conditions, that you were brought up with certain values, that, you know, people agreed upon it, and, you know, we have this sort of morality that we were taught, which is we all agree upon. And that doesn't diminish it at all. It really doesn't. In no way does it diminish it. But it's our construction, right? It's like we made it, and we made something that is
It's
good.
also relative.
That is good.
Construction.
Yeah,
The construction is also relative. This
yeah.
can flow.
Anything we say is going to be relative. Anything. And that doesn't make it cheap, right? It doesn't
No.
make it cheap. Yeah. It makes it real. Makes it real. And relatable. You see, relative, although we tend to think in a postmodern way, oh, it's kind of like, you know, superficial then. No, relative means it's always relating to the conditions. So relative means relationship. And so I see the relative truth is that we take the teachings and we're always having to relate them to individual circumstances, right? And that makes it alive and adaptable. That makes it real. The absolute, you can't, how do we live it? How? Through the relative. What's the relative? Relating to everybody and ourselves. So, you know, if we want to think of it that way, it's like the absolute is lived through relating, which is the relative. I think that's how we, and that's why the form and the emptiness are exactly the same. Yeah. You can take this home. I'm done with it. So, I like to finish with a minute to come back to the silence. Return to the silence and the stillness.